question that I ask a lot of people is, would you want your kids to have the marriage that you have? And a lot of people say no. Either that means, okay, you really have to do the work to change your dynamic, or this is okay. This is not the end of the world. We can split up, share custody of our kids. If you stay together for the kids, it's so much pressure on the kids. You resent them when they're older, but they didn't make that choice. You made that choice. It's really not fair for them to have that.
Welcome to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast. I'm your host, attorney and mediator, Cary Jacobson. Each week, we bring you practical guidance, real conversations, and expert insights to help you navigate divorce with clarity, confidence, and less conflict. If you're ready for a calmer, more empowered path forward, you're in the right place. Welcome back to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast, where we help families move through divorce with clarity, confidence, and far less conflict. I'm Cary Jacobson, attorney and mediator at Jacobson Family Law. And today's conversation is an important one because while divorce is often seen as a legal process, it's also just as much an emotional and psychological one. We're talking about the role of therapy and coaching during and after divorce and how during that internal work can completely change not only your own experience, but also your children's experience. I'm joined today by Dr. Elana Hoffman. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of a telehealth practice specializing in divorce, major life transitions, and relationship dynamics. She's also the author of So Your Wife Left You, Now What? And the host of a podcast titled Talk Relationships to Me. Elana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you bring both professional and personal expertise to this work. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about what led you to working with individuals that may be going through divorce or other life transitions?
Yeah, I think this is such important work. I started out focusing my telehealth practice on relationships in general. So individuals and couples with relationship struggles. I love working on intimacy and connection and things like that. But as I was going through my own separation and divorce, I also realized how important it was to have that emotional support. And so I learned through personal and professional experience that it's really ill-advised to go through it without that kind of support. And it can look a lot of different ways. For me, I'm come from a family of several divorces, and the type of divorce it was really impacted me and my childhood. And so I wanted to really do it differently, my own divorce, and help clients to do it differently. You can have a good divorce, and people don't think about it that way because they just think divorce is this terrible tragedy. And of course, it can be very devastating and sad and unexpected. Mm-hmm. And it can also be a real opportunity for growth and learning and looking back. And if you have the support to take care of yourself during the process, you can have a good divorce, which ultimately is going to affect your kids because it's not divorce itself that negatively impacts them, but it's the type of divorce. So I try to help people strive for a good divorce, basically.
Absolutely. And what type of support do you recommend people who are going through this have, whether it's professional or family or friends? What kind of support is advised?
There's lots of support that can be really beneficial during that time. And it's almost like you have to figure out what you need and who you need that from. You can have friends that you can text normal, daily, stressful stuff, and that's really important. Or you can have emotional support that is important in general to have. But I think that the type of support one really needs a really good therapist or divorce coach that is experienced in it and really knows that the kids are the important part of things, right? And so to help someone really have that perspective, which is difficult to have, that's almost the catch of it. It's like you don't really realize the importance of it until you're kind of on the other side, but because it's such an emotional time. But somebody who you trust, who really has a ton of professional experience or personal experience to learn from. Do you have a therapist? Because is that therapist really challenging you about what it is that you're focused on during the divorce and what it is that you want, and really kind of helping you to look at the bigger picture of what is important about this thing? Why does it matter? To help you be agreeable and just for your kids. I mean,
Right.
there's lots of takeaways, lots of important lessons to learn that can be applied in relationships that are not necessarily your co-parent, right? Sometimes I see therapists who are not helping the problem, who sometimes are so much in their corner. It's important to be on your client's side, of course, but so much so that it doesn't help the situation and maybe they don't really realize the bigger picture. So it's not just therapy or coaching, but it's really like good divorce specific therapy or coaching that I think is actually the most helpful.
Absolutely. It's because, like you said, just like there are attorneys that specialize in different things and mediators who specialize in different things, there are therapists and coaches that specialize in different things. And so having someone who's experienced in the divorce and separation process is key. Now, just for our listeners, and I know we've had both divorce coaches and therapists on before, but from your perspective, since you do a little bit of both, can you explain for our listeners what the difference is between quote unquote therapy and coaching?
For sure. Yeah. Really important distinction. So therapy is a more long-term thing that is focused on diagnosis and at diagnosis, or at least it can be. I mean, at least it can be focused on that. It isn't always. Plenty of people come to me for therapy for relationship problems or other things, but it's sort of a different, longer term, potentially more in-depth approach to a mental health issue, which can be more short term, although it can also be long term. But it's really specific to this particular issue that someone is trying to work on. That doesn't mean that the past cannot be brought up or discussed and does not have a role in that discussion, because it definitely does from my perspective. And I do think that you can't really move forward unless you sort of understand the patterns and the connections in the past that you bring to the table. But it is just sort of a more focused, could be more direct, although of course that also depends on the style of the coach and the therapist, but it is typically sort of more goal-oriented, shorter term, more direct for like a specific thing. And therapy is a bit more open-ended, the model of weekly sessions, things like that.
Thank you. I think it's helpful for people to kind of understand that nuance so that they are picking the right service for them dependent on their situation. And it could be that maybe they come to you for coaching and then end up transitioning to longer term therapy, or vice versa, depending on their particular situation.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, you were talking a few moments ago about a quote unquote good divorce. From your perspective, having had kind of experience both from your family, the alternative to that, what do you find or kind of explain a good divorce to look like?
Yeah, I think a good divorce is one where the kids, and I mean, it's so different, divorcing with kids versus divorcing without kids. I think almost like it should have a different name to it. It's just a totally different thing. But divorcing with kids, having a good divorce, I think really means the kids feel supported, loved, not caught in the middle of things, not that they have to pick a side, that their nervous system is regulated throughout the process of this. And there's lots of things that can affect that, but that I think about it in terms of like what the kids are witnessing and how they are feeling throughout this as sort of a measure of that. But in terms of what parents can do for a good divorce, like I really encourage people to think about the things that are important to them and why, and not to die on every hill, because there are very few hills worth dying on. I mean, from at least a psychological and emotional perspective, it's a really hard ask to trust your co-parent, because time that this is happening, that is a very difficult thing to do for a number of reasons. But it's almost like you have to sort of trust that in the end, they'll be a reasonable person, and trust yourself and be a reasonable person, even if they're not. But each person has the power to change these things. And people are so surprised by changing how they interact, changes their co-parent, and you are open-minded, and it can make such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked in previous episodes that you can't necessarily change the other person, but can really only have the ability to change yourself. But in doing so, how the other person reacts often changes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just human nature. If you are agreeable and flexible with anyone, right? A colleague, a coworker, you know, friend, a parent, if you say, that sounds good, that's a good idea, I never thought about it that way. And we're a human being on the other side of it. And generally speaking, that they will, in time with them, I mean, nobody wants to sort of be the jerk here, right? So If you are really approaching it in a certain rigid, blaming kind of way, then of course they're going to do the same.
Now, I know that you also do some work with adults that are navigating the aftermath of dysfunctional family systems. How do those past experiences sometimes show up in divorce?
Yeah, I mean, you learn from the examples that you see of marriage, that is the blueprint for it. So I ask a lot of questions about what kind of marriage my clients saw, and if they divorced, what kind of divorce they saw. And that's what you think marriage is or divorce is. And so a lot of it is really trying to understand the effect that had and why you approach things a certain way, like why it is the way that it is. And so once they can kind of change that perspective and once they see the benefits of changing those patterns, like they do it and then they see the benefit, then it keeps reinforcing that they can do it. But if you come from a dysfunctional upbringing and whatever that looks like, you just think that's how life is. You just think, well, a marriage is this way and this is how people talk to each other and this is what people prioritize and this is just how it is. And I mean, it's not healthy, right? And that's just one view that you have from a specific perspective in your upbringing. And so once that's talked about, but people choose partners based on the blueprint of what they see, right? And don't really realize the dysfunction.
Yeah. And without that awareness, like you said, those patterns can continue to repeat. So if they're not trying to address them and kind of get the understanding, they may find another partner where that pattern continues to repeat.
For sure. And that's why I think the sort of window of during and after divorce is such an important one. Like, okay, what happened here? What was my contribution to this? People don't want to get divorced once, let alone 2 or 3 times, right? And it's really a good time for reflection and introspection. And this is where a therapist or coach can come in and help identify in a really warm and supportive way, like, how do you contribute to this? What did you bring into this? Like, based on your upbringing and what's kind of going on here, help understand, to really learn about themselves and outside of a relationship too, to really take time to understand themselves, who they are as a person, as a parent, as a whatever their interests are outside of a marriage, and really get confident in that. And then to start, if they want other relationships, to come from a place of confidence and understanding and self-awareness. And I think that is the most important piece of things, once you learn about yourself by doing things, by being on your own, by figuring things out, by parenting by yourself, by making your own decisions about things because no one else is there. So you have to make decisions and you get a lot of confidence that way. Over time, you change. And so you learn who you are. And I really like working with people at that stage of things because they really are kind of coming into their own and really understanding themselves more. It's really nice to see that like confidence grow.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads into what you've talked about, which is the idea of divorce being an opportunity, right? Like now you have that opportunity to make these changes. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're in a relationship that isn't working, it's not impossible. I mean, of course, it is possible to change a pattern, and with a good therapist and things can change, but sometimes they can't. Being out of that dynamic sort of forces you into a period of time where you are dealing with things on your own. You're finding your own footing, every emotion that is coming your way, but you sort of learn that you can handle it. And that confidence is really important. And if you have kids and you share custody, half the time you are parenting in the way that you want to parent. And then the other part of the time you're doing what you want to do with your free time. Right. And it's complicated because you miss your kids, and that all can be true at the same time. You can be kind of figuring yourself out who you are in this next chapter, and you can also be missing your kids. And if you're using your time, your kid-free time in a way that is important, doesn't mean that you're not a good parent or you're not missing your kid. And a lot of people will say, like, they'll stay in marriages because they don't want to miss their kids half the time, or they don't, but it's about how you use the time. It's about the time that you have with them being real quality connected time that is not overshadowed by an unhealthy dynamic and a bad marriage. And so then it's kind of your own, and you think you can't handle bedtime with 2 kids, but then you do. Of course, you really become so much more confident, and you really learn what works for you, and you fill the time somehow with work or with whatever it is that's fulfilling to you. And then you just become more confident in that. And so it's really not, I think it just really is such an opportunity to learn and to grow. And again, most people are like, wow, that was really hard. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to get divorced again. So they really do think about it. They really do want to introspect and kind of take that time.
Absolutely. And that is something that I hear regularly from folks who do end up staying in marriages that are unhealthy for such a long time because they are worried about not being able to see their kids and what that's going to look like. But on the flip side of that, it's, well, what are your children seeing? Right. Mm-hmm. And they're now in this situation where they are witnessing this unhealthy dynamic. And is that better in the long run for them versus having two healthy and happy parents?
Yeah, it is not better in the long run. I mean, it just, people think that their kids don't notice or they don't pick up, but of course they do, right? And the question that I ask a lot of people is, would you want your kids to have the marriage that you have? And a lot of people say no. And so either that means, okay, you really have to do the work to change your dynamic, or like, this is okay. This is not the end of the world. We can split up and we can share custody of our kids. And if you stay together for the kids too, there's so much pressure on the kids. You resent them when they're older, but they didn't make that choice. You made that choice. It's really not fair for them to have that.
Yeah. Now, I believe you also specialize in some neurodivergence in relationships. Can you explain a little bit more about how those differences in communication and processing or even emotional regulation can impact the divorce dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting area that a lot of people don't really understand. And if people are partnered with somebody whose minds work differently than they do, right, then you have to understand that. Both people have to understand that, and they have to really understand specifically how that shows up in relationships and what that means in terms of, you see things differently in terms of planning or flexibility or executive functioning or memory or things like that. And people tend to take them personally, but maybe it's just neurodivergence, and maybe that works and maybe it doesn't. And if you're divorcing, then it plays some role, whether it's known and named or not, but it can impact how you figure out the arrangements and how you see things and flexibility and things like that. And it can kind of continue to affect that in parenting too. There's a good chance you'll have a neurodivergent kid, and this can impact that, and you can disagree on how to handle that. And so that is also an area that I see a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being able to understand how the other person is processing that will help you be able to then, deal with the divorce or negotiate in a way that is going to work for both of you.
Yeah. Co-parenting relationship is very different, of course, than a marriage, and your expectations change. And it's important to sort of see a co-parent as a business partner. And maybe sometimes you have a business partner who thinks differently than you do, and that is frustrating for you. And yet you have this very important project, that project being your kids, and you have to figure it out, right? But rather than rely on them to understand your feelings or connect with you emotionally, or they said this thing and didn't apologize, like, it doesn't really matter because you have this business and you got to run this business. And a lot of times it can really change the expectations of that. It doesn't matter so much anymore emotionally, but you have to really understand that over time.
Yeah. For someone who might be at the very beginning stages of this process and more likely than not are overwhelmed and unsure where to start, can you give our listeners a couple of practical first steps to begin supporting themselves emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, I just really encourage finding a therapist or coach that really understands, that is there for you and can advise you on those emotional pieces, and just also who can also help you put other supports in place, because a therapist is great, but this is a weekly or every other week thing, and you need help in between. So help you just sort of figure out what you need in that process, right? And so sometimes it's just helping you figure out how to take care of yourself. And that seems trite, but it's not, right? It's just really important to try to take care of your nervous system during this process. And so the first step, I think, is to help finding somebody who can help you navigate the process, because people just don't know that this can be, it's a hard process, but it can be easier. It just doesn't have to be as hard as a lot of people make it to be.
Absolutely. Well, Elana, it's been so helpful for you to be here today. This is such an important conversation. Divorce is not just about ending a relationship. It's about understanding yourself, making those intentional choices, and creating that healthier path forward. For anyone who may be listening today how can they find out more about your services, whether it's therapy or divorce coaching?
You can find me on my website, drelanahoffman.com, or on Instagram at dr.elana It's dr.elana And I post lots of divorce content, lots of relationship content. I offer individual therapy or coaching. I have a divorce group that has been really great. That's every other Monday ongoing. And I just want people to know that whether it's me or someone else, get help from somewhere, someone you feel comfortable with. And you just really, it's such a taboo still topic. And that prevents people from getting help. And it doesn't be that way. And you deserve a good divorce for you and for your kids. And to just hopefully change the kind of stigma and shame around divorce in general, because relationships change and things change and it is okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And as always, listeners, if you need legal guidance, mediation, or support navigating divorce with less conflict, visit our website at jacobsonfamilylaw.com. Thank you for listening to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast. And if this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who may need it. Join us next time for another conversation focused on helping families move forward with clarity and confidence. Until then, I'm Cary Jacobson, and remember, how you move through divorce matters just as much as the outcome. Thanks for listening to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. For more resources or to work with us, visit jacobsonfamilylaw.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay drama-free.